It's very interesting for an archaeologist to come to know well the work of an artist like Andy Goldsworthy, who works in the landscape. And in a way, for the archaeologist, you have the same problem. As an archaeologist, you go and you see some enigmatic prehistoric monument and you say, what is this? What does it mean? And in the same way, you come to the work of an artist like Andy Goldsworthy and you say, what does this mean to me? What is the artist getting at? And in both cases, you, as archaeologist and observer, have the responsibility of making sense for yourself of what you see. One of the remarkable things about your art is it seems to have a special existence in time. There is a special moment. Are you conscious of living dangerously when you make some of these works?
Well, I think this reflects very strongly what I feel is in nature. Nature is living dangerously to some extent. There is a tension in nature and it's always trying to push, and these pushes come in rhythms and cycles, like the tide, if you like, push, or the river rising. It's always going a little bit more, and my work reflects that cycle. It will push and reach this point and then tail off, then fall off, and that's what I feel is in nature.
Something you always seem to do is to use nature, but go beyond nature in some almost magical way, so that the onlooker has really to look twice sometimes to realize that this is not simply a product of nature.
Well, I would think it, rather than going beyond, I would think of it going within nature, touching something that is in there that I'm trying to draw out, to try and understand. Things that I don't often understand until I start working. But I know they're there. It's like all places contain such potent possibilities, like this place. It's full of potential, and I don't know yet, that is waiting to be revealed to me through time, through working. I know it's there, and it's just trying to touch it. And those moments where I make contact with these things, it's like is in a moment of intense clarity. I'm not interested in making magic, and I'm not interested in mystery. My art, when I make a good work, is a moment of, as I say, clarity.
And perhaps that's why often the viewer then returns to nature, having looked at your work, and sees new things or looks at it in a fresh way. So I look at snow or ice differently, having looked at your ice works.
The ephemeral work at the center of what I do, the core, that is where I learn, that is where I draw my energy from. And it's from that core that I make journeys into other things. I work with with nature because it's growing, it's alive, it's full of energy, and it's alive with the many layers of seasons, of people in the land. I see each work that I do as another layer upon my own understanding and perception of nature, and that my touch is a continuation of the involvement between people and the land. Their time is obviously a very important element in nature. a leaf lasts for a day, a stone for millions of years. And it's trying to understand those different timescales that is important to me. It puts my own life in a kind of perspective which I'm trying to understand. I think essentially my art is a way of learning and understanding. I suppose it's my way of trying to come to terms with the transience of life and not try to fight that by making always permanent things, but to accept and enjoy it. A very important result of my art is that it makes me work with the land. I have to. And that's why I use spit, use my hands, use thorns, because of the sensitivity in the working process towards nature. I have a relationship, a working relationship because of that I wouldn't get if I used glue or nails. The way something is made is very important. It's like that, the poppy petals. If I had used glue, I would have forfeit the sensation of taste and texture and that very delicate relationship between the wind and the petal and the leaf. Do you use art to help you as an archaeologist?
Well, I'm just beginning to, and that's a very relevant point. And I think the work of artists who operate in the landscape, like yourself, and the other artists who are very active in the landscape, is making us look anew at some of the prehistoric monuments and begin to see those also to understand how their symbolism might work, how they might have an impact on the prehistoric viewer, because the operation must in some ways be rather similar. So I think in a way the contemporary art is feeding back into the interest of the archaeologist.
It's almost like you're doing something that is part of us because we've been brought up in this landscape, and we're working with the source that generated this, that is generating my work. So we're
Right.
touching on the origins of these things. And I enjoyed the idea of making a wall because of those connections it made to agriculture. And I decided to use forms that are to be found on the hills, the sheepfold, the circles. This work has spawned many ideas on this feeling of the sheepfold, the container. It's become very important to me. I like the space inside, this enclosed feeling, the protectiveness. And these are symbols. This is one of the few occasions where I am using a form for its symbolism. I'm not particularly interested in it for its formal geometry in the context of nature. I'm interested in it because it is an agricultural symbol.
And certainly the notion of protection and enclosure is much enhanced by the fact that it's that the contents of one are now different from the contents of another. When I first saw it, and it was grass on both sides, it seemed more geometric, and it's much less geometric now, and the sense of containment is much stronger now that there are different things being contained within the two enclosures.
I remember the first I made the wall, and then the first day that I walked over this hill and seeing it in the context of this valley and the way it relates and connects to the existing network of walls. And it felt like a continuation of those walls made in the past. It's not just a sort of repetition, it actually draws from the past, but is brought together in a way that it is an expression of what has happened here now. And even when this wall collapses, which will be in 100, 200 years' time, if it's not maintained, there will still be a line. The evidence of this wall will always be here.
That's right. And even after 2,000 years, an archaeologist will come and take an aerial photograph or something, and we'll still recover the line, even though it may not be visible readily from ground level anymore.
How do you think your colleagues in the future will explain this?
I think they'll have comments to say about the the behavior of man in the 20th century. They'll put you in your chronological context, Andy.
Yeah.
They'll see it as a product of the 20th century.
I suspect in archaeology, light and weather is very important in revealing things to you, and you must have a special relationship, as I do, with the weather.
That's certainly true. When you're talking about light, one of the most marvelous developments in aerial photography was when it was realized that perhaps at dusk, when the sun is very low, you then get shadows and highlights which reveal in a very clear way the most sensitive variations in the surface.
And that is a very profound lesson about looking for me, that things are hidden. Like I was saying in the river, things are hidden to me, and perhaps I'm just waiting for the right atmosphere and the right light to see properly.